They're lying awake at night replaying every moment they failed you, every time they went cold when you needed warmth, every time they withdrew when you needed presence, every time they dismissed your feelings, minimized your pain, made you feel crazy for wanting basic partnership. They're seeing it all now with brutal clarity. Not the defensive version, where they were just protecting themselves, where you were too needy, where the relationship was too much. The real version, where they hurt someone who didn't deserve to be hurt. Where they destroyed something good through their own incapacity. Where they fucked up in ways they can't undo. And they know it. Not the surface knowing they had while it was happening, where they knew intellectually they were being difficult, but justified it through their fear. Deep knowing, body level knowing. The kind of knowing that wakes them up at 3 a.m. with their heart pounding and their stomach sick. They know they treated you badly. They know you didn't deserve it. They know they destroyed the relationship through their patterns and not through any fatal flaw in you or in what you had together. The knowing is eating them alive. Here's what most people don't understand about avoidance and regret. The avoidant who treats you badly while you're there often shows no remorse, no awareness, no acknowledgement that their behavior is wrong. They're defended. They're in their patterns. They're justifying everything through their fear. You could tell them they're hurting you and they'd make it about you being too sensitive. You could explain what you need and they'd make it about you being too demanding. While you're there, while you're trying, they're incapable of seeing clearly what they're doing, because seeing clearly would require dropping the defense, and dropping the defense would make them too vulnerable. But when you leave, when you stop trying, when the consequence of their behavior becomes real instead of theoretical, the defense starts cracking. And underneath the defense is someone who knows exactly what they did, knows exactly what they destroyed, knows exactly how badly they fucked up. The knowing doesn't come immediately, takes time, takes distance, takes the reality of losing you settling in deep enough that they can't deny it anymore. But the knowing comes, and when it comes, it's devastating in ways they're not equipped to handle. The specific moments when the knowing hits them, they see you somewhere looking happy without them, and something breaks open inside them. You're laughing with friends, you look lighter. You look like yourself again in ways you didn't look like yourself, toward the end when their treatment was crushing you. And seeing you happy, seeing you better without them, creates immediate recognition that they were the problem. They weren't making you happy. They were making you anxious, making you small, making you question yourself. The you they're seeing now, the happy unburdened you, is proof that leaving them was upgrade for you. That you're better without them than you were with them. The proof is undeniable, and it's teaching them something they couldn't learn while you were there. They weren't good for you, they were bad for you. And being bad for someone who was good to them is knowing that creates shame so intense they can barely breathe through it. The knowing hits when they try to date someone new and discover they can't stop comparing the new person to you. New person doesn't understand them like you understood them. Doesn't see past their defenses like you saw past them. Doesn't give them the patience you gave them or the grace you extended or the effort you made. Every comparison makes them recognize what they had with you, what you gave them. How you worked with their limitations in ways the new person won't work with them. And recognizing what you gave them while remembering how they treated you creates sickening cognitive dissonance. You gave them everything. They gave you scraps. You were trying. They were withdrawing. The imbalance is suddenly visible in ways it wasn't visible while it was happening. And seeing the imbalance is seeing their own cruelty, their own taking advantage, their own exploitation of your love. They hear through mutual friends that you're doing well, that you've met someone, that you're in healthy relationship now, and hearing it creates visceral response they can't control. Jealousy, yes. But underneath the jealousy is knowing that someone else gets the you they couldn't appreciate. Someone else is receiving the love they couldn't receive. Someone else is building the relationship with you they were too defended to build. The knowing that you're capable of healthy partnership and they just weren't capable of being healthy partner to you is recognition of their inadequacy that's impossible to defend against. You weren't the problem. The relationship wasn't doomed. They were just incapable. And someone else being capable with you proves the incapacity was theirs. The knowing hits in therapy if they ever pursue it. Therapist asking questions that force them to examine their behavior. What did you do when they expressed needs? I withdrew. What did you do when they were vulnerable? I created distance. What did you do when they were hurting? I made it about me. Saying it out loud to another person, hearing their own behavior described back to them, seeing the pattern laid out clearly, creates confrontation with themselves they can't escape. The therapist isn't letting them justify, isn't letting them make it about your flaws, is holding them accountable for their choices, And the accountability, when it finally penetrates, brings knowing that's accompanied by grief about who they were to you, what they did to you, how badly they failed you. Why the knowing gets worse instead of better over time. Right after you leave, they can still defend, can still tell themselves you were too needy, too demanding, too sensitive, can still construct narrative where the relationship failing was mutual or was your fault for not accepting them as they are. The defensive narrative provides relief, lets them avoid the full weight of responsibility, lets them feel like victim of your unrealistic expectations rather than perpetrator of your pain. But defensive narratives don't hold up over time. As months pass, as they have distance from the relationship, as they experience life without you and discover they're not happier or more free but just more alone, the defensive narrative starts crumbling. You weren't too needy. You needed basic partnership and they couldn't provide it. You weren't too demanding. You asked for reasonable things and they refused to meet you. You weren't too sensitive. You were responding appropriately to being treated poorly. The narrative falls apart piece by piece, and what's underneath is truth. They treated you badly. You didn't deserve it. The relationship failed because they failed you. The knowing also gets worse because they keep discovering new ways they hurt you that they weren't conscious of while it was happening. They remember a specific moment where you tried to talk to them about something important, and they shut you down. At the time, they justified it as not wanting to have heavy conversation, as needing space, as you bringing up issues at wrong time. But looking back, they see it differently. You were reaching out, you were trying to connect, you were attempting to repair something that was breaking, and they rejected the reaching out, dismissed the attempted connection, refused the repair. The remembering of specific moments where they chose their defense over your relationship creates accumulating evidence of their failure that gets heavier the more memories they examine. Knowing gets worse as they recognize the pattern across their life. You weren't the first person they treated this way. You were just the most recent. They did this in their last relationship too, and the one before that. Same patterns, same withdrawal, same making people feel crazy for wanting basic things, same destroying good relationships through inability to show up. The recognition that they're the common denominator in all their failed relationships, that their patterns are the problem, that they're going to keep destroying relationships until they address their shit, creates knowing that's existential rather than just about you. They're not just someone who fucked up one relationship, they're someone who fucks up every relationship. And being that person, knowing that about themselves, is worse than knowing they hurt you specifically, because it means they're fundamentally broken in ways that will keep hurting people until they do work they're not doing. What they're doing with the knowing that makes it worse. They're obsessing over what they should have done differently. Replaying conversations where they could have responded with vulnerability instead of with defense. Reimagining moments where they could have chosen you instead of choosing their patterns. The obsessing is torture because it's showing them all the moments where they had choice and they chose wrong. Chose fear over love, chose protection over partnership, chose their defended state over you. Every replayed moment is another piece of evidence that the relationship didn't have to end, that you could have worked if only they'd been different, that they destroyed something that was working through their own choices. They're punishing themselves through the obsessing, not learning from it, not using it as motivation to change, just replaying it over and over in ways that create suffering but don't create growth. The punishment feels deserved. They hurt you, so they should hurt. They destroyed the relationship, so they should suffer. The punishing is attempt to balance the scales, to make themselves feel the pain they caused you, to atone through suffering for what they did. But punishment without change is just suffering. It's not transformation. It's not growth. It's wallowing in guilt that feels like accountability but is actually just self-flagellation that keeps them stuck. They're also trying to manage the knowing through avoidance. Drinking more, working more, distracting themselves with anything that keeps them from sitting with what they did. The avoidance provides temporary relief but makes the knowing worse because avoidance prevents processing. The guilt and shame and regret just accumulate, getting heavier, creating pressure that builds because it's not being released through acknowledgement and amends and change. The avoidance is them trying to not feel what they need to feel in order to grow past it, and not feeling it means staying stuck in it. Some of them are reaching out to you, trying to alleviate the knowing through apology or explanation or attempt at reconciliation. The reaching out is rarely about you, it's about them. They need you to forgive them so they can stop feeling guilty. Need you to understand why they were how they were, so they can justify their behavior to themselves. need you to give them another chance so they can prove to themselves they're not as bad as the knowing is telling them they are. The reaching out is an attempt to make themselves feel better about what they did. And reaching out for selfish reasons, reaching out to manage their own guilt rather than to genuinely make amends, is just another way they're fucking up. Another way they're making it about them instead of about the harm they caused you. The difference between avoidants who use the knowing to change versus those who don't. Small percentage of avoidants use the knowing as catalyst for actual change. They take the recognition that they fucked up and they let it break them open enough to pursue help. They find therapists. They commit to the work. They spend months or years examining their patterns, processing their wounds, developing capacity they didn't have. The knowing becomes motivation. They don't want to be this person anymore. Don't want to keep hurting people. Don't want to keep destroying relationships through the same defended patterns. The pain of knowing what they did becomes fuel for transformation. These avoidants look back years later and recognize losing you as turning point. Worst thing that happened to them that became best thing because it forced them to finally address their shit. But most avoidants don't use the knowing this way. Most just sit in it. They know they fucked up. They feel terrible about it. They're consumed with regret. But the knowing doesn't drive them to therapy, doesn't drive them to change. They just carry the knowing as permanent weight, as evidence of their badness, as confirmation that they're broken in ways that can't be fixed. The knowing becomes identity instead of becoming catalyst. They're not someone who made mistakes and is working to be better. They're just someone who destroys relationships, someone who hurts people, someone who's fundamentally incapable of love. The identity forged from knowing without changing is toxic identity that ensures they'll keep repeating the patterns because they believe the patterns are who they are, rather than believing the patterns are behaviors they could change through work. The difference between the two types is whether they can tolerate the discomfort of growth or whether they choose the familiar discomfort of staying the same. Growth requires vulnerability, requires admitting to therapists and to themselves how deeply they're broken, requires feeling feelings they've defended against their entire life. Staying the same is uncomfortable, but it's known discomfort. They're familiar with the guilt, the regret, the pattern of destroying relationships. Familiar discomfort is easier to tolerate than unfamiliar work of change, so most choose familiar. They know they fucked up. They feel bad about it. And they'll fuck up the next relationship the same way, because knowing without changing is just knowledge that creates suffering without creating transformation. Why then knowing they fucked up doesn't change what you should do? Their knowing is real, the regret is genuine, the guilt is eating them alive, and none of it changes that they treated you badly, that the treatment hurt you, that you were right to leave. Their suffering about what they did doesn't obligate you to relieve their suffering through forgiveness or reconciliation, or giving them another chance. Their pain is theirs to sit with. Their regret is theirs to manage. Their knowing is consequence they earned through their behavior, and consequences are meant to be felt, not rescued from. The knowing also doesn't mean they're capable of being different. Knowing you fucked up is not the same as developing capacity to not fuck up. Regret doesn't create skills. Guilt doesn't build emotional regulation. Shame doesn't teach vulnerability. They can know they treated you badly while being completely incapable of treating you better, because capacity is built through therapeutic work over time, not through feeling bad about your patterns. If they're not in therapy, if they're not doing sustained work to change, the knowing is just intellectual awareness that hasn't translated into behavioral change. And intellectual awareness without behavioral change means they'll repeat the patterns with you if you go back, with the next person if you don't. Them knowing also doesn't repair the damage they caused. The harm is done, your trust is broken, your sense of safety with them is destroyed. The relationship you thought you had turned out to be a relationship where you were trying alone while they were defended and withdrawn. Knowing they shouldn't have been that way doesn't undo that they were that way. Doesn't undo the months or years you spent feeling unwanted, unimportant, like you were crazy for needing basic things. The damage is permanent even if they're genuinely sorry. Sorry doesn't repair what's broken. Only sustained different behavior over a long period of time repairs what's broken. And sustained different behavior requires therapeutic work most of them aren't doing. You also don't know if the knowing is genuine or if it's just temporary guilt that will fade once they're no longer facing consequences. Some avoidants feel terrible right after the ending, feel the knowing intensely, express regret, seem genuinely remorseful. Then 3 months later they're fine. They've moved on, They've constructed new defensive narrative where actually the relationship was doomed anyway, or actually you had your problems too. The temporary knowing fades, and they're back to their defended state, back to their patterns, back to hurting the next person the same way they hurt you. Temporary knowing isn't transformation. It's just emotional response to consequences that fades when consequences stop being acute. The specific things they know now that they couldn't see while you were there. They know you were trying harder than anyone has ever tried with them. While it was happening, they took your effort for granted, thought everyone would try this hard, thought your patience was normal, your understanding was baseline, your willingness to work with their limitations was what anyone would do. But dating other people is teaching them different. Other people don't try this hard. Other people don't extend this much grace. Other people leave faster when the avoidant does their usual withdrawal routine. The comparison is teaching them you were exceptional, you were giving them something rare. You were offering them relationship most people don't offer to someone as defended as they are. And recognizing your exceptionality after losing you is recognizing they lost something irreplaceable through taking it for granted. They know the problem was their capacity, not your needs. While you were there expressing needs, they made your needs the problem. You needed too much, you wanted too much, you expected too much. But now they're seeing it differently. Your needs were normal. You needed communication, consistency, emotional availability, basic partnership things. Not too much, just what healthy relationship requires. The problem wasn't that you needed too much. The problem was they couldn't give even the basics. Your needs exposed their incapacity, and instead of addressing their incapacity, they blamed your needs. The knowing that they blamed you for needing what everyone needs is knowing that they were gaslighting you, making you doubt your own reasonable requirements, making you feel broken for wanting things that aren't broken to want. They know you were getting hurt, and they watched it happen without changing. This might be the worst knowing. You were clearly in pain. You were telling them you were hurting. You were showing them through your anxiety, your sadness, your increasing smallness in the relationship. They saw it. They knew you were suffering, and they didn't change their behavior to stop causing the suffering. They watched you hurt, and they kept doing the things that were hurting you because changing would have required them to be uncomfortable, and they prioritized their comfort over your pain. The knowing that they chose their defended comfort over your actual suffering is knowing that reveals something about their character they don't want to see. That they're capable of cruelty through passivity, harm through inaction, destruction through refusing to change even when they see the damage their patterns are causing. They know you loved them more than they deserved, and they destroyed that love through their inability to receive it. You loved them when they were cold. You loved them when they were withdrawn. You loved them through their patterns, their fear, their defended state. You loved them generously, patiently, in ways most people don't love someone who's giving back so little. And they couldn't receive the love, couldn't let it in, couldn't let themselves need it or depend on it or trust it. The love you were offering could have healed them if they'd been capable of receiving it. But they weren't capable. And not being capable of receiving love that generous, that patient, that accepting is knowing that they're more broken than they wanted to admit. That their damage runs deeper than they acknowledged. That they need professional help to become someone who can receive love instead of destroying it through their defended incapacity. What the knowing is costing them that you can't see. The knowing is destroying their ability to be in present. They're stuck in past with you, replaying what they did, obsessing over what they should have done differently. Can't be fully present with new people because they're comparing new people to you and finding them wanting. Can't be present in their life because their mind is constantly pulling them back to the relationship they destroyed, the moments they failed you, the ways they fucked up. Being stuck in past is preventing them from building future. They're frozen in the knowing, unable to move forward because moving forward would mean leaving the relationship behind, and they can't leave it behind when they're carrying this much unresolved guilt and regret. Knowing is also destroying their self-concept. They thought they were a good person. Thought their patterns were just protective mechanisms. Thought their defended state was reasonable response to their wounds. Thought they were doing the best they could. But knowing they hurt you badly is forcing them to confront that maybe they're not a good person. Maybe they're a person who hurts people. Maybe their defended state isn't protection, it's weapon they use against anyone who gets close. Maybe they're not doing their best, they're just doing what's easiest while letting people who love them suffer the consequences. The confrontation with themselves, with the gap between who they thought they were and who their behavior proves they are, is destroying the identity they built. They don't know who they are anymore if they're not a good person. And not knowing who they are creates crisis that's making everything harder. The knowing is creating isolation. They can't talk to friends about what they did, because talking about it would require admitting they treated you badly, and their pride won't let them admit that. Can't process it with family, because family knew you and liked you, and hearing that they destroyed it would create judgment they can't handle. Can't share it with new romantic interests, because admitting they destroyed their last relationship through their own patterns is not attractive revelation on early dates. So they're isolated with the knowing, carrying it alone, unable to process it with anyone, unable to get support or perspective or help sitting with it. The isolation is making the knowing heavier, because unshared pain is always heavier than pain you can process with others. Knowing is preventing them from trusting themselves in future relationships. They know they fucked up with you, know they treated you badly despite loving you, despite wanting it to work, despite knowing intellectually that their patterns were hurting you. If they could fuck up that badly with someone they cared about, if they could hurt someone they loved, if they could destroy something they wanted through their own patterns, then they can't trust themselves not to do it again. Can't trust that wanting relationship is enough to make them capable of relationship. Can't trust their intentions when they know their capacity doesn't match their intentions. The not trusting themselves is making them either avoid relationships entirely or sabotage new relationships through expecting themselves to fail before they fail. The knowing that they're capable of destroying what they want is paranoia about their own capacity that's self-fulfilling. They expect to fuck up, so they fuck up. And each fuck up confirms they were right not to trust themselves. The moment when they realize the knowing isn't enough. There's a moment when the avoidant recognizes that knowing they fucked up, feeling terrible about it, being consumed with regret, isn't actually changing anything. They're still the same person with the same patterns, still defended, still withdrawing when things get close, still incapable of the vulnerability that partnership requires. The knowing is just awareness without transformation. And awareness without transformation is just suffering without growth. The recognition usually comes when they repeat the pattern with someone new. New relationship starts. New person gets close. Avoidant feels the familiar fear. Avoidant withdraws. New person gets hurt. Pattern repeats exactly. And watching themselves do it again, watching themselves hurt someone new the same way they hurt you, despite knowing how much damage the pattern causes, creates horrifying recognition. Knowing doesn't stop the pattern. Feeling bad doesn't prevent the behavior. Regret about past harm doesn't create capacity to not cause future harm. They need help. Professional help. Therapeutic intervention that develops actual capacity instead of just awareness of incapacity. But even with recognition that knowing isn't enough, most still don't pursue help. The recognition that they need therapy is itself overwhelming. Means admitting they're broken in ways they can't fix alone. Means committing to process that will be uncomfortable and expensive and long. Means facing wounds they've defended against their whole life. The recognition that they need help is often where they stop. They know they fucked up. They know knowing isn't enough. They know they need therapy, and they still don't go, because going is scarier than staying stuck. So they stay stuck, keep carrying the knowing, keep suffering from the regret, keep repeating the patterns, keep hurting people while knowing they're hurting people. The gap between knowing what they should do and actually doing it is gap most of them never cross. Why your job is not to care about their knowing, they know they fucked up. They're suffering from knowing, they're consumed with regret about how they treated you. And none of it is your problem. Their internal experience is theirs to manage. Their guilt is theirs to sit with. Their knowing is consequence they earned, and consequences are meant to teach, not to be rescued from. Your job is not to make them feel better about what they did to you, not to absolve them of guilt, not to give them forgiveness that lets them off the hook, not to provide them another chance to prove they can be different when they haven't done the work that would make them different. Your job is to protect yourself from being hurt by them again, whether through staying away if you've left or through maintaining boundaries if you're still in contact. Their knowing doesn't make them safe. Knowing isn't capacity. Regret isn't change. Feeling bad about past behavior doesn't prevent future bad behavior. They're still the same person with the same patterns, unless they've done extensive therapeutic work to become a different person. And most of them haven't done that work. Most are just carrying the knowing while remaining exactly as incapable as they were when they were treating you badly. Your job is also to trust your own experience over their regret. They can be genuinely sorry, and you can still be genuinely done. They can know they fucked up, and you can know you're not going back. They can want another chance, and you can know they haven't earned another chance through actual change sustained over time. Their feelings about what they did don't determine your response to what they did. You get to decide whether their knowing matters to you, whether their regret changes anything, whether you're willing to risk being hurt again by someone who hurt you badly, even though they knew better. The truth is, their knowing is about them, not about you. They're suffering from what they did. That suffering is their growth opportunity if they use it to pursue therapy and change. Or it's just their suffering if they don't. Either way, it's theirs. You already did your time suffering from their patterns while trying to make relationship work with someone who couldn't meet you. You don't owe them your presence or your forgiveness, or your willingness to try again while they sit with consequences of their own behavior. They fucked up. They know it. Let them sit with knowing. That's how consequences work. That's how people learn. That's how change becomes necessary instead of optional. They know they fucked up by treating you badly. Good. Let the knowing do its work on them while you do your work of building life with people who don't have to lose you to recognize they should have treated you better. The knowing will follow them into every future relationship. The knowing that they fucked up with you doesn't stay contained to just you. It bleeds into everything that comes after. Every new person they meet gets compared to you. Every new relationship gets measured against what they destroyed. They'll be with someone new, and in good moment they'll think, I had this with them and I ruined it. In difficult moment, they'll think they would have handled this better than I'm handling it. The knowing becomes permanent filter through which they experience every future connection. They can't engage with anyone new without the specter of you, without the memory of how they treated you, without the awareness that they're capable of destroying something good. And they might destroy this too. They'll carry you as the standard they can never recreate, not because you were perfect, but because you gave them something specific they can't find again. Your particular patience, your specific understanding, your exact way of seeing past their defenses. They'll search for it in new people and never find it, because what you gave was uniquely yours. And searching for you in everyone else, while knowing they destroyed what they're searching for, is its own punishment that follows them indefinitely. Every person who isn't as patient teaches them what your patience meant. Every person who doesn't understand them as well teaches them what your understanding provided. Every person who can't see past their walls teaches them what gift it was that you could see the real them and love them anyway. The knowing also means they'll sabotage future relationships through comparison and through fear. They'll pull away from new people before getting too close, because they're terrified of fucking up again. Or they'll cling too hard trying to prove they can be different, trying to make up for what they did to you with someone who isn't you. Either way, you haunt their future. The knowing that they had you and lost you through their own patterns becomes ghosts they carry into every relationship after. They know they fucked up, and they'll keep knowing, keep remembering, keep carrying what they did to you as permanent proof of their capacity to destroy what they want. What they wish they could tell you but can't. They wish they could tell you they see it all now. Every moment they dismissed your feelings. Every time they made you feel small. Every instance where they chose their defense over you, they see it with clarity that's painful, with detail that's excruciating. They wish they could tell you that they understand now what you were trying to tell them then, that they get it in ways they couldn't get it while it was happening, that the fog of their defense has lifted enough for them to see what they did and how wrong it was. They wish they could tell you that you weren't crazy, that your needs weren't too much, that your expectations weren't unreasonable. They made you doubt yourself, made you question whether you were being too needy, too sensitive, too demanding, and they wish they could tell you that you weren't any of those things. You were just normal. You were asking for what healthy relationship requires. The problem was never you. The problem was always them, their capacity, their inability to meet even basic requirements of partnership. They wish they could tell you they're sorry in ways that would actually mean something, not the shallow sorry they might have said while it was happening. Deep sorry, sorry that comes from actually understanding the harm they caused, actually recognizing the pain they created, actually seeing you as person they hurt rather than as obstacle to their defended comfort. They wish they could apologize in ways that would repair what they broke, that would undo the damage, that would make you whole again. But they know sorry isn't enough. Know that words don't fix what actions destroyed. Know that the apology they wish they could give wouldn't change what they did or repair what they broke. They wish they could tell you that losing you was the worst thing that's happened to them, that they think about you constantly, that they regret how they treated you more than they've regretted anything. They wish you could see inside their head and see how much space you occupy, how much pain the knowing creates, how much they're suffering from what they did. Not because they think you should care about their suffering, but because they want you to know you mattered, you were important. Losing you wasn't nothing to them, even though they treated you like you were nothing. They wish they could tell you they understand why you left, and they don't blame you for leaving. That you were right to go. That you deserved better than what they were giving. That staying would have been you abandoning yourself, and they're glad you chose yourself, even though your choosing yourself meant losing them. They wish they could release you from any guilt you might carry about leaving, any doubt about whether you tried hard enough, any wondering whether you should have stayed. They wish they could tell you clearly, you did the right thing, you gave more than enough, you stayed longer than you should have, and leaving was the only healthy choice left to you when they refused to change. The specific memories that haunt them most, the specific conversation they keep replaying where you tried to tell them you were hurting and they shut you down. You were vulnerable. You were honest. You were asking for help, and they responded with defensiveness, with dismissal, with making it about how you were attacking them, rather than about how they were hurting you. They replay it now and see what they couldn't see then. You weren't attacking. You were reaching for them. You were trying to save the relationship. And they slapped your hand away. They rejected the reaching when reaching was the bravest thing you could do. The memory of your vulnerability meeting their defensiveness is memory that makes them physically sick now because they can see your face, can remember the hurt in your eyes, can recall the exact moment you pulled back and something between you broke. They remember the time you cried and they felt nothing. Or worse, they felt annoyed, felt burdened by your emotion, felt like your crying was manipulation or pressure, or too much for them to handle. And they remember responding with coldness, with distance, with making you feel like your pain was a problem they didn't want to deal with. Looking back now, they can see that moment differently. You weren't trying to manipulate. You were in genuine pain. Pain they caused, and instead of comforting you, instead of taking responsibility, instead of caring that someone they supposedly loved was hurting, they made it worse through their cold response. The memory of your tears meeting their indifference is evidence of their cruelty they can't excuse or explain away. They remember a specific moment when they saw you trying and they didn't try back. You planned something special, you made effort to connect with them, you were clearly working to make the relationship good, despite their patterns making it hard. And they responded with minimal effort, with taking your effort for granted, with not matching your energy or your care. They remember watching you try so hard and feeling nothing but vague resentment that you were creating pressure through your trying. Now they see it as you loving them, as you fighting for the relationship, as you doing the work they should have been doing, and they didn't appreciate it, didn't reciprocate it, didn't deserve it. The memory of your effort meeting their apathy is evidence of how much they took you for granted, how good they had it, how badly they fucked up by not recognizing what they had while they had it. They remember the last time you told them you loved them, and they couldn't say it back. Or they said it, but it was hollow, was just words without feeling behind it, was them going through motions while being completely defended against actually feeling the love they were supposedly expressing. They remember seeing your face fall slightly, seeing you register that their I love you didn't match your I love you in weight or truth or feeling. And they remember not caring enough in that moment to fix it, to be real with you, to drop their defense enough to love you the way you were loving them. Now that memory is torture because they can see what you were offering and what they failed to offer back, can see the imbalance, can see you loving them openly while they loved you half-heartedly from behind their walls. Why some of them will reach out, and why you should be careful if they do. Some avoidants reach out after the knowing hits. They contact you with apologies, with explanations, with promises they've changed or are changing. The reaching out can feel validating. Finally, acknowledgement. Finally, admission that they were wrong. Finally, recognition of how they treated you. But be careful. Most reaching out is about them managing their guilt, not about them genuinely making amends or demonstrating change. They reach out because carrying the knowing is too painful, and they think making amends will relieve the pain. But amends that are about relieving the person's guilt, rather than about repairing harm to the victim, aren't real amends. They're selfish, they're using you again, this time using you to make themselves feel better about how they used you before. Real amends come with changed behavior sustained over significant time. Real amends include taking full responsibility without expecting forgiveness or reconciliation. Real amends respect your boundaries about whether you even want to hear from them. If they're reaching out to unload their guilt on you, to explain why they were how they were, to ask you to understand or forgive or try again, They're still making it about them, still centered on their needs rather than on the harm they caused you. They also reach out because they're hoping you'll give them another chance before they've done the work to deserve another chance. They know they fucked up, they feel bad about it, and they think feeling bad is enough to warrant trying again. But feeling bad doesn't create capacity. Regret doesn't build skills. Knowing you were wrong doesn't make you able to be right. Unless they've been in therapy for significant time, unless they can point to specific ways they've changed and specific evidence of the change, unless they can demonstrate capacity they didn't have before, they're asking you to try again with the same person who hurt you. Same patterns, same limitations, same defended state. They just have awareness now that they're hurting you, which might make them better at apologizing after hurting you, but won't prevent them from hurting you. Be careful if they reach out because their timing is often strategic. They reach out when they're lonely, when they're struggling, when other relationships have failed, and they're looking back on you as the one who got away. They're not reaching out because they've transformed and they want to share their transformation with you. They're reaching out because they're uncomfortable, and they remember you made them comfortable. You soothed their discomfort. You were a solution to their loneliness. The reaching out is them trying to use you again as emotional support system, as validation source, as person who makes them feel better about themselves. If you respond, if you engage, you'll likely end up back in same role you had before, giving them what they need while getting nothing you need in return. The permanent ways the knowing changes them, even if they don't change their patterns. Even avoidants who don't pursue therapy, who don't change their patterns, who keep destroying relationships through the same defended behavior, they're still changed by the knowing. They're more cynical now, more convinced that relationships don't work, more certain that they're fundamentally unlovable or incapable of love. The knowing that they destroyed something good doesn't make them think I should change. It makes them think I'm broken in ways that can't be fixed, so why bother trying? The cynicism is defense against hope. If they don't hope for relationship, if they don't try for partnership, they can't fail again, can't hurt anyone again, can't experience the knowing again. The cynicism is them trying to prevent future failure by not attempting future relationship. They're also more guarded in future relationships. The knowing that they're capable of hurting people they care about makes them protect potential future partners from themselves through keeping even more distance than they kept before. They're doing the I'll hurt you, so I'll just stay away calculation before relationship even develops. The guarding is them trying to be ethical, trying to prevent causing more harm, but it's also them ensuring they stay isolated. The guard prevents hurt, but it also prevents growth, prevents intimacy, prevents them from having experiences that might challenge their defensive patterns. The knowing also makes them simultaneously more ashamed and more defended. More ashamed because they have concrete evidence now of their capacity to harm, of their patterns destroying something real, of their inability to love someone who deserved love. The shame is heavy, it's constant. It's affecting their self-worth in ways that make them feel fundamentally defective. But the shame also makes them more defended because feeling this defective is unbearable. And defense against feeling is how they've always managed unbearable feelings. So they defend against the shame, which means defending against the knowing, which means reconstructing narratives where actually it wasn't all their fault. Actually, you had your issues too. Actually, the relationship was doomed anyway. The defense rebuilding is them trying to survive the shame. But the defense rebuilding also prevents them from using the knowing as motivation to change. Why the knowing ultimately doesn't change the fundamental truth. They know they fucked up. The knowing is real, is deep, is causing them genuine suffering. And none of it changes the fundamental truth. They hurt you. The hurt was real. The damage was done. Your pain mattered then and it matters now, regardless of whether they've come to understand what they did. Their belated understanding doesn't undo the months or years you spent feeling unwanted, unimportant, confused about whether you were crazy for needing basic things. Their current regret doesn't repair your trust that they broke. Their present knowing doesn't heal your wounds that they created. The fundamental truth is also that knowing isn't enough. Transformation requires action, requires therapy, requires years of uncomfortable work developing capacity they don't have. Most of them aren't doing that work. They're just sitting in the knowing, suffering from it, being changed by it in ways that make them more defended rather than more open. And knowing without changing means they'll hurt the next person the same way. The pattern continues. The knowing accumulates, but the behavior stays the same. The fundamental truth is that you were right to leave, right to protect yourself, right to require more than they could give, right to choose yourself over someone who couldn't choose you despite claiming to love you. Their knowing they fucked up doesn't mean you should have stayed, doesn't mean you should go back, doesn't mean you owe them forgiveness or another chance, or your continued attention to their suffering about what they did to you. You were right then. You're right now. Their knowing changes their experience, but it doesn't change the rightness of your choice to leave someone who was treating you badly with no indication they would stop treating you badly. They fucked up by treating you badly and they know it. The knowing is eating them alive, is following them into every future relationship, is changing how they see themselves in ways they'll carry forever. Let it. Let the knowing do its work. Let them sit with what they did. Let them experience the consequences of their patterns in ways they couldn't experience while you were absorbing those consequences for them. Their knowing is their burden to carry. Your job is to keep moving forward into relationships with people who don't have to lose you, to figure out they should have treated you better. People who know how to value you while they have you. People who don't need the devastation of permanent loss to teach them lessons about basic respect and care and showing up. They know they fucked up. Good. You know you deserve better. Even better. The knowing on both sides is what allows you to stay gone while they sit with what they destroyed, through their own defended incapacity to love you the way you deserve to be loved.